Let this sink in. 12,000 BC, people started drying food. 12,000 BC. That's how long people have been preserving food of some way. Let's talk about that right here on the Backyard Gardens podcast.
To have a good harvest, one must plant good seeds and must also use the right kind of fertilizer. The carrots have grown large and firm. How good they will taste.
Are you currently drying any food, Batavia? That's the question.
No, I'm not currently drying any food.
Nothing?
No. I mean, I am curing some things, but that's like episode 6.
All right, well, we're going to pause this, and Batavia will be right back with her drying situation. No. No. So
harvest something right now and set it up to dry, right?
Yeah, I am drying a few things, but let's see. All right, so I'm going to read from the National Center for Home Food Preservation and saying, I'm going to change a word in here because this was written in 2002 and things have changed. So in ancient times, the sun and wind would have naturally dried foods. Evidence shows that the Middle East and Asian cultures actively dried foods as early as 12,000 BC in the hot sun. Later, cultures left more evidence, and each would have methods and materials to reflect their food supplies: fish, wild game, domesticated animals, etc. Vegetables and fruits were also dried from the earliest times. The Romans were particularly fond of any dried fruit they could make. In the Middle Ages, they purposely built still houses created to dry fruits and vegetables and herbs in areas that did not have enough strong sunlight for drying. A fire was used to create the heat needed to dry foods, and in some cases, smoking them as well. So that last sentence is interesting because not only were they drying it, but then they were also infusing it with smoke and changing the flavors of it. It's pretty cool. Do you know when the Middle Ages were?
Say
Do you know when the Middle Ages were?
I don't know. It's going to be corny, but somewhere in the middle.
A middle of what? I don't even know. I showed up today.
I was pausing because I was thinking about like the idea of smoking something, and it's like, well, it's still dried, right? But as a part of that process, you know, I guess this fish tastes different than the normal dried fish they were doing back in 12,000 BC. Or was that the Romans?
You know, I don't know. I'm off that page right now. I was just looking up. Middle Ages is dates 500 to 1500. So that's when that was. Drying fish. I'm not a big fan of dried fish. I'm just going to go on the record. But smoked fish, which I guess is smoked dried fish, is tasty. Just it's an acquired taste, I would say.
Yeah.
But
there's a little spot that there are a couple of errands that I run and it's like on a bridge, and you can tell when they open for the season because it's like the line of cars, the line of people that are outside. It's like a little like a fisherman's hut. Like that's the whole decor. And they do a lot of like dried, what do you call it? Like, salmon and things like candied and whatnot. Yeah. That's not necessarily, I mean, I don't know if I've ever even had it now that I think about it, because I'm going to say it's not my thing, but I don't know if I've ever really tasted it.
I don't know anybody that had anything like that, but I know there was this man that was on the side of the road when I was a kid. His name was Billy Ray. He made some smoked barbecue chicken. Damn, that was good chicken, but that's all right.
Every now and again when I consume something I've made, I feel like I'm just not doing it right. Like, this could be way better than what I've put together. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting when we read this that they were saying the Romans were fond of any dried fruit they could make. And then also herbs, drying herbs, because back then herbs were like a religious thing, you know, so you wanted to preserve those herbs to use them for your
rituals.
Rituals. I was going to say ceremonies, but rituals would be a better word. You know, I mean, it's even in the Bible where there was certain herbs that had to be used when you went into the tent of God. So this goes way back. Way back.
Yeah, it was actually when you mentioned herbs, I was saying to myself, like, how we have transitioned the use of herbs, you know, like still very much medicinal, but like this idea of the seasoning of food is basically the primary thought that we have when we think about herbs, which is something that I feel like, it's been a whole journey when it comes to growing herbs. And then you look for the, purpose of using them in your cooking. And I'm still on the road to growing enough to actually dry to complement kind of, the course of the year or the years, if you will. Because there's some things that I do use as staples, and it's like, all right, I have the purchased container, but gosh, wouldn't it be nice, especially some of those things grow wild, like, your parsley and your oregano and so on. But anyway.
Oh, so you're trying to go into the planning portion already. I'll buy it.
I didn't see the show notes. I didn't see the outline.
I didn't share the outline with you
for the episode. Yeah.
Okay. No, like we eat a lot of basil. Most gardeners eat a lot of basil. They grow a lot of basil. It's super easy to grow, super easy to propagate, which if you propagate it, you just cut it, stick it in water, you get roots, and you get another plant. That being said, there's other herbs that I consume, but I don't consume enough of to necessarily grow. You know what I mean? Like a bay leaf, for instance. Like I cook a lot of soups in the wintertime. I cook 2 to 3 soups a week. That's like my thing, is I cook soups. That being said, I use 1 bay leaf in each soup. And honestly, I don't even know what a bay leaf does, but I know that every recipe calls for it.
Yeah.
And I know you can grow it, but should I be growing it so I could preserve it and use it in my own food? Like, I don't know the answer to that. And I'm not really looking for an answer because it's a personal decision.
Well, there's so many things, like the list of what you can grow or what you're interested in growing is so long. And I've come to terms with the idea of I can't grow it all in a season, right? And it's just a part of my longer list. I actually have done a bit of searching on bay leaves because generally they're expensive. You buy them from the store, right? So I think for that, it maybe goes up a couple of notches on the list. But I've already forgotten the thing that I learned whenever I was reading about growing like, a plant to then harvest the leaves, the bay leaves or whatever. So I'm not going to spend more time on that because that's the depth that I have. But I do want to, so a part of food preservation. Did you hear the internal taking a breath? A part of the preservation conversations, the series, like the reading and research that we're doing on our own, and the toying around with different methods. All of that again ties back to maybe I can introduce something to my diet that I'm not currently consuming, and it's just based on lack of experience with it, So I've done a lot of drying in the past. I dried, we used to go apple picking every year. And when we went apple picking, you can pick by the bushel. So we'd get like 3 or 4 bushels when we went. I mean, we went deep. But when we got... Like how many apples are in a bushel?
A lot. I don't know. Okay. It was a lot.
Like 30, 40, 50 a lot?
Yeah, like over 50. Okay. I would say. I mean, obviously, it depends how big the apple is. And somebody out there right now is like, no, an apple bushel is this much. Like, please let us know if you want. But we would come home with those apples, and we would make apple chips. We would make apple butter. We would make apple jelly. We would make all of these different things, and we would consume them over the time. And that, apple chips were a snack. I was never super crazy about them, but I still ate them. But then we got into we would go to the grocery store and we would buy strawberries, peak season. They were like 50 cents a pound or something because they just had so many. And we would get those and we would dry those as well. We did a lot of fruits. We would do some vegetables and stuff for our backpacking meals. We got into custom making soup packets and stuff like that. We did do some beef jerky when we ate beef. So there was that. But we used a dehydrator. But I know people that use ovens. If you have a greenhouse in the summertime, it would be a good place to do it as long as it's not overly humid in there. That's another good place to do it. Dehydrators, I think, are really the thing to use. So, one thing I would say about a dehydrator, the one we had was not high end. And I don't mean high end like you have to get the $1,000 model, but I wouldn't cheap out on it because it didn't hold the heat well. And what happened is it had stackable trays and you could remove a tray or whatever, but it had inconsistent heating all the way through. So like your top ones right where the fan sat would just right away. And then the next ones, and then all the way down to the bottom. So you just kind of had this fluctuation. You know what I mean? And I know there's people out there that do a lot of drying.
There's a community.
Yeah, I mean,
we're not a part of it, but it exists.
The community is strong too for drying. Let's put it that way. And I mean, I respect that because if you go to the store and you buy, just go look at dried fruit. Number one ingredient is sugar. You know what I mean? It's got more sugar than a can of soda per like a quarter cup of it. You know, it's crazy. So this is like how you can preserve it and have it naturally, you know?
Yeah. So you're tapping into that piece of like my tinfoil hat, right? Like, why are we putting so much sugar in a piece of dried fruit? Right.
Yeah.
You know, so we don't have time today to get into that. But what I do challenge myself to do, and I challenge others to do, is be open to this thing not tasting the way that you're accustomed to it tasting or that you think it should taste. Right. So let's say that I go to the farmer's market. We have another 2 months of the farmer's market in our area. Apples are going to be coming in strong. I'm not growing that type of fruit in my garden, but I can buy, maybe not a bushel, but I can buy some apples. And let's say that I'm not going to eat all of the apples that I purchase, but they're in season and I start to dry some using my dehydrator. It's going to taste different than anything I've had in some type of trail mix or some type of like fruit package of dried fruit or whatever have you. And it's being okay with that, because as soon as you do that comparison and say, oh, it doesn't taste like, whatever the package is in aisle 9, then you're walking away from what the real goal is here.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, so I was just looking at dehydrators because it's been something that I've been talking to my wife about, how I want to get back into it because I do enjoy it. And when I was looking at it, I did a little bit of research. And when I say a little bit, I mean a little bit. But I picked one out, I think. Preliminary picked one out. You know how it is. I analyze the crap out of anything before I give anybody my money, which I recommend everybody else do all over the place. Doesn't matter what it is. And I saw that they had it comes with everything comes with a recipe book. And they had honey bourbon peaches dried recipe. So my experience is when I dried it, it got a lot more tart flavor. But maybe, I don't know how much honey goes into it or anything, but brushing some honey on can help eliminate that, because the act of drying is exactly what it says. It's drying. It's removing the moisture.
Yeah.
So the things that you want to look out for when you're drying foods is like, don't have them overlapping. If you're drying bunches of herbs, which I feel very comfortable saying most people dry herbs if they grow them. If they're preserving something, that's like your natural first step is I'm going to dry my basil. And, I dry my basil by hanging it up in my kitchen or on my seed starting shelf or something. And I make bundles. But when I make those bundles, you want to make sure that they're not super tight to trap the moisture in and keeping that airflow going around it.
Yeah, it's a quick note. So if you harvest your basil, which reminds me, once it flowers and you dry it, do you still, because you know how the flavor tastes like when something like basil flowers, is it still just the same for you from a dry perspective?
Yeah. So basil, and I mean, most herbs in general lose a little bit of flavor when you dry them.
So maybe it loses a little bit of that bitterness that comes with the flowered, like when the plant starts to bolt. So if let's say you bring it in, you wash it, don't bundle it there. Separate those stems, the leaves or whatever have you, and let them get some dryness to them. Now they're not dried,
right,
from that. But once you bundle them, you don't want to do it sopping wet. It's basically it, because that definitely is going to start clinging to each other. You're going to definitely have, some mold or mildew or whatever have you, which actually we'll probably need to cover off on this with each method in each episode. The idea of the safest way to do this thing, because there's a lot of apprehension around this. I mean, if we thought about the number 1 reason, number 2, number 3 reasons why people don't do more of this, safety would be right up there. And then kind of the time it would take compared to what you think you can buy for the cheap at a store, right? Like, you know, I'll go ahead and pay for it instead of trying to do it on my own, which, I mean, we all are guilty of in one way or another.
Yeah, for sure. And so like, this is the time of year in which I start to dry my herbs. You know, it's coming to the end of the year, so I try to go out and, you know, harvest a bunch and get them. And I'm actually planning on doing a video about it, just, you know, to help people, because, you know, the whole food preservation thing.
Yeah.
But I'm going to be drying a bunch of herbs, and the biggest thing, and it's like, I can hear it right now. I can hear my wife. This is what she say. I don't want this stuff just sitting around the kitchen. Now she understands that, like, this is life. This is garden/homestead life. This is what it is. Like, you're going to leave stuff laying around the kitchen. It's got to ripen. It's got to dry. Like, this is it.
Yeah.
And then when it's all said and done, you can put it away. But, you know, if you wash it, I don't even wash my basil. Say what you want. I just don't wash it. I just put it up. But if you do that, then you lay it out, let the water droplets dry, and then you bundle it and hang it up, whatever. You know, at any given point, we can have lavender and some flowers and stuff drying. Sometimes we'll have some like hydrangea flowers drying for decorations and stuff like that, which that doesn't really count because who gives a shit if they dry completely, let's be honest. But and I take them and then I put them, I have a coffee grinder, an electric coffee grinder. I don't grind coffee anymore. I got that ship sailed. We worked on ships for a long time. We were used to drinking like rock bottom gut nasty coffee. So we use that now to grind our herbs. So it's just, you know, you give it a couple pulses and it's done, you know, once it dries. But sometimes I let them dry for months. I don't even touch them. I just let them dry because what's it going to hurt? You know what I mean? And then I'll do it all in big batches at the end of the year. When it's all said and done, then I'll come back and I'll do them all at once.
I saw someone drying I'm pretty sure it was basil, the leaves whole, and saying like basically grind them when you're ready to use them. And so there's no right or wrong way, right? The method you're using versus the method this person describes. I think the common theme is the easiest way for you to use it. So I want to put my tomatoes that I've harvested down in the basement because it's probably on any given day 5 to 7 degrees cooler down there, right? Like I'm not ready to process them yet. I have a better chance of them staying fresh. By fresh, I mean like not molding, right? If I put them downstairs versus if they're in my kitchen where they're in my direct sight, right? Because the kitchen, the heat fluctuates, right?
Right.
However, putting them downstairs where again, it may be, you know, it may buy me a couple of days. They're out of sight, out of mind.
That's an issue.
So I need to keep them in a place where, again, the key is what's the best chance at me using them?
Right.
Right. Not only using them fresh, but okay, when we get done here, it's the reminder when I go down to make my lunch, oh, you know what? Go ahead and get a bite to eat. And then you need to really get to processing them.
Yeah.
Right. You know, because it's not for these things for like when we talk about something like that, you know, processing them, I could dehydrate my cherry tomatoes, right? Processing them means a bunch of different things when we were talking about preserving. When it comes to something like those herbs, that's a great example of I can use the basement for that because I don't need to keep an eye on them for the next, 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 days. Right. If I do it properly, if you will, I can then come back in another 5 or 6 days, another 2 weeks or whatever have you.
I want to touch also before we move on, I want to touch on the smoking aspect of it, the smoking drying. And then I want to touch on how we feel about drying in general. So one, it says here, which is super fascinating, that people were actually building houses specifically to dry fruits. They were basically building a dehydrator back then, but like entire houses. And so I am a big backpacker. If you don't know, now you know. And, we go out hiking and, we're big into all that good stuff. And there's a show that I watch. It's called Alone. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about it. And it's basically a survival expert goes out, they get 10 items, and then last one standing loses. There's no challenges. There's nothing. It's just survive. And my man went out in the Arctic, okay? And I'm not joking when I say Arctic, and shot a 900-pound moose with a rudimentary bow and arrow. And then he had to cure it, right? Or he had to dry it. So he had this 900-pound moose. Now, up there, you can also freeze it, like just leave it outside. but it was still warmish. So he had it set up in his tent, not his tent, in his shelter, and he was smoking it. And, I mean, he had like fat dripping on his face and everything, like, you know, but he was drying this food to store. And another guy shot a deer in, I don't know where they were, but anyways, it wasn't really cold yet. So he had to build a separate smokehouse. Now, let me put it into perspective for you. Dude was eating 100 calories a day for like 3 weeks. And once he shot this thing, so he had like, you know, he's losing weight super fast. He was really weak. My man shot that deer, toted it back, and then decided, hey, I need to build a separate structure to smoke my meat so I could preserve it to eat it later. That's impressive. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I know we don't really talk about meats a lot on here. I mean, I myself am a pescatarian, so I can smoke fish and all that. But that the meat is the big part of this that can really introduce bacteria and stuff like that. Now, for smoking, like for instance, I am about to embark on a chipotle pepper mission. I'm going to try and smoke some jalapenos to make chipotle peppers. So if that works, great. And that's just another way to preserve them. So I get that smoky flavor that I thoroughly enjoy.
I could smell it just now. Could you? Yeah.
Oh, it is so good.
Which actually, we're at time, but we have to mention the idea of drying peppers.
Yeah.
And it's used in so many dishes that we know and love, but it's not something that's commonly done, right? You know, I'm just generally speaking when it comes to gardeners, and I grow a lot of peppers, and it's actually something I'm looking into because, again, I'm always trying to figure out what ways can I enjoy this later and enjoy it differently.
So I grew up, and my mom, you know, my grandfather was a big gardener. My mom, she dabbled, and then she got more into it. I grew up with a string of peppers hanging from the ceiling in my house. All you need is a needle and fishing line and some pepper. And usually it's cayenne peppers. You know, it's a real general one. And you just string them up.
Yeah.
And then you dry them right there. And then when you need one, you just pluck it off. You pull it off. Then you can grind it, make a powder or whatever you want. And that brings me into how we feel about drying. So after we've had this conversation, very quickly, would you consider drying more, and what would you consider drying?
I think I'd consider drying more, and I think it's some of the general vegetables. Like, I'd love to think about green beans, you know, so a different way. I mean, just think about storage space if they were dried. And I'm going to go with peppers just because I currently have some cayenne peppers that have dried, and they kind of dry by accident because I just never got around to them a couple of years ago once I pulled them off of the plant.
So if, I am the same way. Okra is something I want to dry, and green beans and peas. I've done peas before, and I've done carrots, and I want to get back into those because they're really good for us to make our backpacking meals. But also a friend of the show, Sir Purple, shout out. He sent me some pepper powder last year. And I was like, dude, this is like, it was exactly what I was looking for, was pepper powder, because I could add it to my food and just get heat, no flavor.
I keep forgetting about this.
And so that's something that right now I'm trying to do, is dry some peppers and make some pepper powder. So I'm getting to the point now where I'm getting more and more peppers, and I'm going to try and put some back and maybe make some and just kind of test out different things. So next year, if I really want to, I can go. I've got a couple different peppers, including the Sir Purple pepper that I want to do. And that's simply for the simple fact, I was like, how many fresh peppers can a brother man eat? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, when I go to the bathroom, I can't handle this so much, you know? So we can our jalapenos, and we're going to make chipotles, but, you know, and like I said, I was looking into getting a dehydrator because I definitely think that this is a very good way to use for multiple things: herbs, medicines, vegetables. You know, I hunt, so if I shot something, I would definitely dry some. So all that stuff we could do. I think this is a very good method, and it's easy way to get started too. Even if you're only doing herbs, you're already in that field.
I think the first thing that I dried, I actually used my oven. It took a long time, but it was crushed red pepper flakes.
There you go.
Right.
No flakes,
I'm still using
only powder.
them too.
Only powder. From here on out, for me, it's only powder, no more flakes. And with that being said, everybody, thank you for joining us on the Backyard Gardens podcast. And until next time.
Oh, that's me. See ya.
We hope you enjoyed today's show. Please follow us on YouTube at Backyard Gardens TV.
Instagram at Backyard Gardens TV. Over on our website, backyardgardenstv.com. And then we have Patreon at Backyard Gardens.
And don't forget to check out our links below to help the show. Thank you so much for joining us as we learn to grow and grow for change. Cut.
Now you know why people feel like celebrating at harvest time.
All over the world, people have feasting and good times when the crops have been gathered in.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for checking out the Backyard Gardens podcast.
If you like what we're doing and you want to continue to support the podcast, head over to our Patreon page to sign up.
You can also make a one-time donation using PayPal. Both of these links are in the description.
With your support, we can continue growing and helping others in their gardens. See ya.
If you guys want some Backyard Gardens gear,
go to the link below and check out our t-shirts, mugs, pint glasses, and other gear.
All purchases go towards helping to support the show, so thank you so much in advance, and we hope you enjoy. We want everybody to have a garden, and we're going to give you a chance to win free seeds every month.
Head over to backyardgardenstv.com and enter your email address to be entered in all of our giveaways.
Good luck.
We want you to be a part of our gardening community. DM us a picture of your garden at Backyard Gardens TV on Instagram, and we will share it with our listeners.